Hi, everyone. Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk. I'm really excited to be speaking in for EAs. Thank you so much, Linda and Olive and Linda and everyone else who helped. So wonderful. Thanks and good to see you on there, Carolyn. Today's topic is the search for inner truth and overview of soul-centered astrology. So one of the wonderful things about soul-centered astrology or esoteric astrology is it answers these questions that maybe some of you have had is, what is my soul's purpose? Why am I here? Is there something more to life? What is my true path in life? Why do I keep having these same experiences all the time? What is it that keeps happening in my life? Why do I feel depressed all the time? So what I like about esoteric astrology, it really helps you to learn how to break out of the box you've created for yourself and align with a higher purpose, a higher sense of what you're here for, what your purpose is here in life. And I know this is EA Zoom, and I just need to say, before there was evolutionary astrology, there was esoteric astrology. So we'll go. It's going to be a little bit of an overview for esoteric astrology, and I'm going to delve in a couple of things. And please feel free to ask questions as you need and give input as you feel comfortable. I think really some of the important parameters to understand and to ask ourselves is make sure we're talking about the same thing. So here we're going to talk about what is a soul, what is spirituality, and why specifically esoteric astrology. First and foremost, it's really good to understand that this really is soul-centered astrology isn't necessarily for everyone. Not everyone is here having a soul-centered life, but everyone here on the planet is ensouled. Everything on the planet is conscious. The soul is that which we cannot see, is the part of that which was here before we were born and will continue after our physical body ceases to operate. I see spirituality as the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things, the seeking of that which lies all around, within, and without. Esoteric astrology seeks to give one the tools to blend personality, which is personality or exoteric self, with the soul or esoteric self, so as to do more soul-centered work in one's life. It adds like a different depth to our traditional astrology. This focus requires a level of intellectual sophistication and discernment. I like to say that with religion or religious, it is about following other beliefs or other practices, whereas spirituality is about following one's own inner guidance. And here, what I really appreciate about the esoteric teachings is the inner guidance is a really crucial aspect of this teaching. Trying to figure out, I can do that. Okay. So the Theosophical Society was started in 1875. You may have heard of Madame Blavatsky. There's also Alice Bailey. She was involved with it. And the Tibetan, who's also known as Djwal Khul or DK, also the master, is a teacher who's shown up in there. There's also Kutumi and I have a bad time pronouncing this, Lord Myra. And the belief is there, as you can see there in French and in English, their logo is, there is no religion higher than truth. Il n'y a pas de religion supérieure à la vérité. Meaning that the dogmatic aspect, the ways that religions can become so set in stone, it's really important to understand that there needs to be an understanding that there's a deeper truth, that it's the truth that runs through all the religions. It's really important. So this, part of what the Theosophical Society, started, back after Neptune was found in 1846, was this beginning and understanding of a deeper spirituality, something that, that there's a little more to life than hard work. The Tibetan first appeared in Madame Blavatsky's book, The Secret Doctrine, in 1888, and then in several of Alice Bailey's telepathically received books. So esoteric astrology is just one aspect of the Alice Bailey Ageless Wisdom teachings, which she stated the Tibetan master Djwal Khul shared with her. It's a very important thing. It wasn't channeled information, but it was information that actually was shared. So there's this idea of a co-creation Joelle Kuhl actually appeared to her and said, I have some books I want to write, and I would like to work with you in doing them. And she initially said no. So that was her first answer to spirit. Sometimes that's what many of us do when we're on this path, trying to figure out what is the truth for ourselves. So esoteric astrologers typically base their studies on Alice's 5-volume treatise on the 7 rays, with specific focus on volume 3, which is entitled Esoteric Astrology. These works overall focus on ensouled matter, the path of the initiate and disciple, the evolution of soul consciousness, and the issues which block that evolution. Bailey presented a more fully developed and articulated astrology than previously presented by Blavatsky. If you look at what Blavatsky wrote, she basically, from what I've been able to determine, and I'd love to hear more if anyone else is able to share with me, but I've only been able to see like maybe a one-line thing about the planets and the signs, not that much. Whereas, you know, Alice and Joelle Kuhl really go into a beautifully in-depth explanation, analysis, review, and possible hintings of future ways they would look at what astrology can really do for us as people. These people now I'm talking about. Alice Bailey is one of the major founders, of course, with the esoteric astrology. The pictures I had in the beginning, I'm going to go through each one of those individuals right now. Alan Leo, it's a pseudonym, is widely given credit for starting the movement towards a more psychologically oriented analysis in astrology. He's one of the first advocates to argue for a loose interpretation of possible trends of experience. I put valence here because it makes me think of Rick Tarnas's work on the valent structure of astrology, the way, you know, the energies move in themes rather than looking at them as predictive astrology. Leo's influence has been described as making a turning point in horoscopic delineation, and he made many trips to India and had several legal battles. You have to remember back at the turn of the last century, astrology was seen as, whenever it was used as in a fortune-telling manner, that was considered illegal in a lot of states and a lot of countries, certain cities, depending. And so you can get in trouble if you were found to basically be telling someone's future as opposed to telling them what kind of themes might be happening to them in their life. So probably a major shifting point for the way we look at astrology. I highly recommend Alan Leo's book on esoteric astrology as well. The reprint looks like this. Alan Okun, of course, our current age, who has done so much to bring this into more of a modern understanding. From his website, it states he was born in 1944. He majored in Romance languages and linguistics at New York University. He is the author of a dozen titles, including Soul-Centered Astrology, Rulers of the Horoscope, and Alan Okun's Complete Astrology. He was the director of the Wisdom School here in Santa Fe, co-founder of the Australian Institute for the Development of Consciousness, and was director of esoteric studies at the Chiron Center in Lisbon. Most importantly, he's a member of the New Group World Servers and a lifelong student of the work and teachings of the Tibetan master Joelle Kuhl and legacy of the ancient wisdom teaching. Alan, I was fortunate enough to be able to work with Alan for a number of years, and through the process be able to access the information a little bit better. I don't know about any of the rest of you out there if you've ever tried to approach any of Alice Bailey's writings or her work, but they can be a little ponderous, you know, that Victorian, you know, it's the idea that since these are esoteric wisdoms that we need to hide them in very creative, artistic, beautiful language, so as the meanings might be a little more hidden and you have to do work more to find them. So it's a little bit of work to kind of make it through through Alice Bailey, and Alan does a good job of presenting it in a way that makes it a little more sensible. And of course, the founder of evolutionary astrology, Jeffrey Wolf Green. From the School of Evolutionary Astrology website, Jeffrey Wolf Green has been called the founder of evolutionary astrology because he first started to lecture on the revolutionary astrological paradigm in 1977 after receiving a dream from his spiritual master. In that dream, the entire paradigm of evolutionary astrology was conveyed to Jeffrey. Jeffrey lectured all over the world on evolutionary astrology from 1977 to 2001. And he established evolutionary astrology schools in a number of countries and wrote books on evolutionary astrology. I don't have to tell you all that because you guys all know the wonderful information. So I've got Alice Bailey, Madame Blavatsky, and Joelle Kuhl up here at the top, showing their birth and deaths for Alice and Helen Blavatsky. Djwal Khul is said to be on the planet, but there's a question as far as like what type of ways which on the planet. One of the things that's very important for me when I look at any sort of a belief structure or understanding about a philosophy, one of the most important things for me is that it allows for all of us to have our own understanding or resonance patterns with it. And so what I find is very important is at the beginning of these books, there is this paragraph by Djwal Khul, and it begins, "The books that I've written are sent out with no claim for their acceptance. They may or may not be correct, true, and useful. It is for you to ascertain the truth by right practice and by the exercise of the intuition. Neither I nor AAB," meaning Alice Bailey, "is the least interested in having them acclaimed as inspired writings or in having anyone speak of them with bated breath as being the work of one of the masters. If they present truth in such a way that it follows sequentially upon that already offered in the world teachings, if the information given raises the aspiration and the will to serve from the plane of the emotions to that of the mind, the plane whereon the masters can be found, then they will have served their purpose. If the teaching conveyed calls forth a response from the illumined mind of the worker in the world and brings a flashing forth of his intuition, then let that teaching be accepted, but not otherwise. If the statements meet with eventual corroboration or are deemed true under the test of the law of correspondences, then that is well and good. But should this not be so, let not the student accept what is said." And I think, this is really, it gives me goosebumps when I read this, because we're so raised in a world, and this isn't even in our current age, this is what, all the major religions feed on. This is what any kind of an organization feeds on, is this idea of, a very top heavy dissemination of information that has to be obeyed and followed. Otherwise there are consequences. And so what I really appreciate about this is like, it's like seeding, and what a perfect time. Here we are with Mercury retrograde in Pisces. Mercury's going back all the way back into Aquarius to bring back that wonderful Aquarian energy to bring into the transcendental waters of Aquarius and transcendental waters of Pisces, so that they can be ready again for Aries and go through the cycle again. It's really important, for us to be able to see, how do these things work? The reason why we follow astrology in the first place, at least I do, I can't speak for all of you, but my sense is that because we see these patterns being confirmed and affirmed by not only the astrological information that's being presented, but what we know and perceive about our astrological understandings, how the planets work, how the signs work, how the aspects work in with relationship for one another. And then also, of course, where they happen, which is in the houses. So this, to me, is a really beautiful thing that is just really basically, put it in the back of your head, see if this theme works. If it works for you, great. If not, don't worry about it. The reason why I kind of giggled about, not interested in having them acclaimed as inspired writings is because it's kind of funny, because this is a very large organization at this point in the world. And there are many, many people following it and really do believe this is the work of the masters. So I think understanding, the work of the masters works, through us in ways that help us to understand things and see things, then we're able to, deepen our understanding and become more aware of what we need to do. And so this was written August of 1934. It looks like my glyphs for Pluto and Neptune went missing. February 18th of 1930, of course, the discovery of Pluto. September 23rd of 1846 was the discovery of Neptune. And so what we see in this work is a really strong influence of these. We see this Neptunian understanding of spirituality, a larger, greater context. And then, of course, the Plutonian strength and power that's involved. Drink water. And as many of us know, when it comes to looking at a chart, we know that the birth chart, there are a few things that the birth chart can't reveal. It can't reveal whether it's a person, place, thing. Can't reveal if it's male or female. And as far as what we're talking about today, it cannot reveal consciousness. Many of you heard the old adage, on earth as it is in heaven. Another way to look at it, and we see it obviously in astrology, is as above, so below. there's a diagram I'll show at the very end of the talk that kind of references this. It's within the esoteric teachings. The idea is that there are 7 levels for each level of existence. There are 7 levels, and as we go through them, you know, the macro, of course, is the micro. It's the idea of fractals. You know, the ways that things continue to replicate themselves on a higher level and a lower level. It's very important when it comes to esoteric astrology. Let's see. Here. I love this quote. Be humble, for you are made of earth. Be noble, for you are made of stars. So we have the galaxy, our solar system, our planet, and us. There's nothing really different in any of these materials, just as far as the ways we've been combined in the consciousness involved for each. One of the key things when it comes to esoteric astrology is the understanding of the rays. So in addition to understanding that there are an esoteric understanding to the planets, to the signs, and to the houses, and to the aspects, actually, there's also a larger framework, which is called the ray. There are 7 rays, and these are energies which basically are the building blocks of the universe. They are a particular type of divine quality or energy. They infuse spirit and form. They're the builders or building blocks of all that exists. All that we see and all that we don't see is permeated with these rays. They are divine expression. And the 7 rays are akin to the bands of the rainbow. They are the many bands of energy which make up the one. Our physical, emotional, intellectual, and spirit selves are composed of the various rays. They can appear in singular, meaning that you can have a bunch of maybe the first ray or second ray, or what happens with most of us is we end up being a combination, maybe 1, 2, 3, and 5, or 1, 3, or 2, you know, just different numbers of rays that are in multiples together. So in order to begin with the 7 rays, the first set of the 7 rays is what are called the 3 rays of aspect. These are the divine, basically the holy trinity, if you'd like to think of it, of divinity, of all that is in the universe. They are the primary building blocks. There's ray 1, which is will. There's ray 2, which is love, wisdom. And there's ray 3, which is active intelligence. Now, we live in a solar system that has a second ray sun, which means that our solar logos, or our sun, is a love, wisdom focused entity, or logos, or God, being. And because that is the case, every one of the other planets in our solar system, because they receive reflected light back from our sun, all have love, wisdom as an aspect to them. I know, given our current age and all the challenging things that are going on right now, it's kind of hard to believe that, you know, that we live in a love wisdom universe, but I guess we all have to take the hard route to find it. So when we look at each of these 3 rays, and also all 7, in fact, we can use love wisdom in addition to them. So when we look at ray 1, we can call it not only the ray 1, which is the ray of will or willpower, it is also the will to love. This 3rd ray is not only active intelligence, but is the loving active intelligence. This means that active intelligence is imbued with love. It can't help but be it because we're washed in the light of our sun. I'm going to go through each. I've got some images now for each of the rays and kind of give you a little bit of an idea of how they look and how they work and what type of themes are carried here. Lightning, when you think of lightning, there's that immediate impulse, that will, that force. You know, the first ray is, you know, let there be light. It's the ability to make something manifest. Charlemagne was an example of a ray 1 ruler. The crown is a symbol of will. It takes a lot of will to be a king or a queen and to rule a people, to hold that together, to cohere the energy in such a strong central core as to be able to hold that and then strengthen it, and then to ask people or tell people what they need to do. A volcano is a wonderful example of natural will. Ray 1. Gandhi, I mean, when you think about it, there's no God higher than truth. Kind of interesting when we talk about the theosophical theme. There's no rule above God. There's no truth higher than religion. No religion higher than truth. Sorry. And it's funny when you think of Mahatma Gandhi. You know, one of the things he really taught us was how to do civil disobedience. You know, holding that will, being clear in it, but not being will that is something that people can react to. It's just holding that place is another incredible strength of willpower, obviously. Adolf Hitler was a Ray 1 individual. He used his energy in an entirely different way. Okay, and Ray 2, love, wisdom. Oh, by the way, sorry. The color too for Ray 1, as you can see in the background, is blue. Ray 2, love, wisdom, the color is yellow. The Madonna and child, mother and child, that's such a primary instant feeling of love that I think many of us, as soon as we see it, we know and intuit that sense of love that is carried between a mother and a child. Roses, especially red roses. Jesus Christ was a perfect example. All of his teachings were about love. Alice Bailey was a Ray 2 individual. Kuan Yin, goddess of mercy, willing to stay, the bodhisattva who's willing to stay behind until all individuals have been able to return to the Tao from physicality. The Book of Wisdom, she openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. Wisdom is that act. So when we go about learning things, you know, those of us who get passionate, those of us who love astrology and love many other things, what happens is as we gain that, that's knowledge we gain. But as we add with it, when we apply that love to it, when you apply the passion of love, the desire to know more and to gain it in a way that has a greater understanding, love and wisdom combined, love and knowledge combined is wisdom. So I just really, I like to think of that with the Book of Wisdom quote here from Proverbs 31:26. And I'm not advocating any set religion, by the way. This is the esoteric studies are not about any one denomination. So this is universal. This isn't about one theme. Just to let everyone know. Third ray of aspect is active intelligence. Wonderful pink color. A spider's web is a good example of active intelligence. When you think about that, you know, it makes the web, and then any little gyrations that go on anywhere, any kind of a touch or any kind of movement anywhere along the web actually is received. They're finding now, I don't know if you guys have heard about this or seen this, but recently they found more studies regarding spiders recently. My head gets so full sometimes. And they are finding that they perceive their webs as an extension of themselves. It's similar to when humans use tools, when they map the brain as far as how the brain works. When we use tools, our mind incorporates it so that our mind doesn't consider that that our body stops at the hand. Our body stops at wherever the end of that tool is. So it's kind of interesting. It's a similar kind of energetic system of how spiders are looking at it, or how spiders live it. The pen, for writing down thoughts, a labyrinth, the idea of going within, finding a greater sense of connection. St. Thomas Aquinas is a wonderful example of active ray, third ray intelligence. To one who has no faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible. Great little Catholic koan there. Albert Einstein. I love this picture of him too, because he's such a zany little individual. He, by the way, was quite a follower of Alice Bailey. Supposedly he has some Alice Bailey books that are just, they're back in the Lucius Trust now, that are they're just written on and scribbled in notes. And when you think about it, the E equals MC square, many scientific individuals say that's really more of an intuitive understanding. And so it makes sense that he would bring this forth from, that's kind of a higher intuitive level. Bertrand Russell, there is something feeble and a little contemptible about a man who cannot face the perils of life without the help of comfortable myths. Someone who relied on himself very strongly. So these three rays of aspect combine to create four rays of attribute. The first is the fourth ray, which is the harmony through conflict. The idea that that conflict must exhaust itself for harmony to remain. One would obviously think Libra when it comes to this, but actually it ends up being Scorpio, Taurus, and Sagittarius. Because when you think about it, what is it that gets us into trouble? Ray 5 is concrete knowledge in science, a little slightly different variable than the active intelligence. This is more, how things actually become embodied or become in form that it's carrying this frequency. Ray 6 is devotion and abstract idealism. These are the energies of religion, gurus, sometimes war. And finally, Ray 7, which is order and ceremonial magic. So we'll go through each of these now. Do we have any questions? Are we doing okay so far, Linda?
Michael, when you say somebody is Ray 1 or 2 or whatever, how is that worked out?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. Can we hold that to the last part, because it'll make a little bit more sense at the end?
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.
It is, to be honest, that is actually one of the challenging things, and you'll get to see a little bit of a sense of how that is when we get to a little bit. And we should have more than enough time, because yeah, we're only half an hour in, so we're doing really good. Okay, thanks. Any other question about the material that's been presented so far? Sounds good. Let's be clear. Okay, so for Ray 4, I like this joke. So the first person asks the second person, "Damn, are you a newspaper?" And the person says, "No, why?" And the first person says, "Because there's a new issue with you every day." Meaning, there's always something going on. So these, the yin yang symbol is a really wonderful example of harmony through conflict, finding that harmony back again. A seesaw, of course, is a good example of that. William Shakespeare, if anyone who's read any Shakespeare, his books are rife with harmony through conflict and how somehow magically it all gets resolved. Beethoven, one experience to have the symphonies he had playing in his head and then be deaf and not be able to hear his own symphonies be played. Leonardo da Vinci, an amazing, brilliant man. When I think about how many people on the planet he would have been able to share his ideas with on a level that they could understand, it must have been very lonely for him. And he was gay. So it wasn't easy back then either. So fifth ray, concrete knowledge. Detachment is a good keyword. Color green. E equals MC squared. A formula, something, a concrete way to represent something that is abstract. That would be concrete knowledge. Excuse me, a computer. Excellent example of concrete knowledge. When you think about what these objects are that we're working on, I'm working on a laptop right now. There are those of you in the room all over the globe. And what a wonderful gift, because this gives us this ability to use that third ray energy. Remember that the spider web, You know, we think of the internet, the World Wide Web, and then we have something like the concreteness of a computer that allows us to access that in a way to be able to take as much of a benefit as we can with it. The Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur, the ones who first took flight in the United States, fifth-ray individuals. A laboratory is a great example of concrete knowledge when you think about it. Of course, everything's physical, it's there, it's manifest, you can put things together and see what happens. My gosh, my mind just went blank on his name. Stephen Hawking's fifth ray. What an amazing thing he did. You know, he basically was trapped in his body, and so he used the limits of his mind and his imagination to delve in and come back with amazing understandings and theories about how the world and the universe works. Again, you know, taking E equals mc squared and, you know, and putting it there, putting it into reality, into physical form. The Great Pyramid is an example of concrete knowledge. Incredible formula made physical. Thomas Edison, one of the people who helped us with electricity. Tesla, the other one, two arch enemies of one another. And Louis Pasteur, all three of these concrete knowledge. When you think about what each of them did in their own respective rights for understanding and furthering society and quality of life. I mean, Pasteur for penicillin, Tesla and Edison for bringing electricity, bringing light, allowing, you know, which of course then gave rise to televisions and then gave rise to then the computer. So you see the chain of events. Ray 6, loving devotion, beautiful. Purple and yellow, very high octave energy. Sir Lancelot. And actually, to be honest, I would say most knights, most chivalric knights, the ones who were devoted, especially when we think of that 19th century idealization of knighthood, of, you know, the Arthurian legends, the idea of giving up everything for a higher ideal is very much what loving devotion is about. Praying hands, giving prayer, holding prayer. Joan of Arc is, of course, a phenomenal example of loving devotion. What she did, her clear insistence about what her visions were, changed France, changed England. The Sacred Heart, and the devotion to it. Dogs are a great example of sixth ray energy. They tend to love us very much. This was my last Weimaraner when she was a little heavy. But, you know, they love us. They devote themselves to us. Anyone who's had a dog, anyone who has a dog, when you come home, you know, even if it's for being away for 15 minutes, you would think that, you know, you were the most loved and most precious thing on the planet. That's loving devotion. Ayatollah Khomeini was a sixth ray individual. The Crusades is an example of the sixth ray, when the Catholics went into Jerusalem and did what they did. And, you know, we're still living with a lot of the ramifications, and we're still causing problems back there in the Middle East. Saints. Jimmy Carter is a wonderful example of loving devotion. His Habitat for Humanity. He's one of the oldest souled presidents we've had in a very long time. And he's in his 90s, and he and Rosalind are just still making a difference on the planet and helping people. That's loving devotion. Horses are another example. If you've ever had the benefit or the fortunate opportunity to have a relationship with a horse, or have had a horse or been able to ride one, they're quite wonderful creatures. And, oh my gosh, I forgot his name too. Oh well. TV Evangelist, Graham. Not good with names today, must be the Mercury in Pisces.
Billy Graham.
Billy Graham, thank you, that's it, yeah. Who actually, you know, yeah, I'll leave it at that. But yeah, he's a wonderful example of loving devotion. Finally, we get to the seventh ray. The seventh ray is loving synthesis. The seventh ray is basically that which brings everything else together. A diamond is a good example of this when you think about how a diamond refracts light and therefore gives us all the different colors of the rainbow. You can see how that is a synthesis of color, a synthesis of frequency. Diamonds have been valued for a long time because of their clarity, not just because of their clarity, but because of how they do flash, how they do show those rainbows, how they bring a brilliance. They call it scintillation. The 8-pointed star. 7-pointed star, sorry. Otherwise it wouldn't be 7, yeah. A rainbow, of course, an example of it. Michelangelo, his work is sublime in that sense. An altar, you know, for those of us who have altars in the home, it's a wonderful way for us to put our things together and, you know, bring our magic, put our magic together on a table and call forth things. Thomas Jefferson, his love for our country and what he did to help make a difference in the country. This is not the swastika. This is the Tibetan symbol. You know, this is for the wheel. It's turning. It's the wind. Hitler used it, obviously, and changed it for a different purpose, flipped the other way. Merlin, the wizard, of course. Synthesis, what he did for Arthur and for England. Benjamin Franklin, when you think about the sheer amount of what that man wrote, setting up libraries, you know, his experiments with the kite and the key for electricity and his familiar quotes and his trips to France and trying to create some sort of ambassadorial, he was our first ambassador to France, you know, bringing forth a level of understanding, you know, that we're all here, that we're all one. That's an understanding of loving synthesis. And finally, the wand, of course, which Merlin likes to use. Let's see, I think, how do I want to do this? Yeah, okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break down and put the ray number, ray energy, the planets, and the signs. Actually, you know what, I'm going to do this, actually. I think this will be a little more fun, because it'll explain it. Actually, let me do this. I'll do this as a little bit and sit on there, because since this will be recording, this is a great overview sheet that can show each of the rays here on the left-hand column. The description or what the energy is about is the second column. Third column is the planets, and the fourth planets are the signs they rule. So each one of the rays rules 3 signs each. And then planets are various. There are 2 additional planets in, 2 additional planets in esoteric astrology. There's a planet called Vulcan, which is a planet that exists between Mercury and the Sun. Some say they can see that through gravitational pulls on Mercury, that there is something there. So far, science hasn't been able to determine it, but Vulcan is considered to be an octave, a higher octave actually, of Pluto. Vulcan was the god who would take the other gods' tools or war weapons and make them stronger. You know, when you think about a blacksmith, the blacksmith takes steel or iron, heats it up, hammers it, puts it in the water, heats it up, hammers it. That's called annealing. What you're doing is you're making the structure of the metal bond more and more tightly so that that metal is not likely to shear, crack, split, and such. And so Vulcan had this wonderful capacity, kind of like he was like a Chiron character in a sense. And what Chiron did for helping to teach everyone else, Vulcan did with their tools. Like, hey, you know what, I can make that sword, you know, go through, you know, 5 people instead of 2 people. So he's very powerful in that sense. The second planet is the planet we live on, which for some reason in traditional astrology, we don't pay much attention to, which is called the Earth. Earth is always 180 degrees opposite the sun. So it kind of makes sense for those of us when we sit here sometimes in our sun selves and we look at someone who's on that opposite side and we go, oh, I'm so glad I'm not them. Well, the truth is, through esoteric astrology, the understanding is that your dharma, the way you ground yourself, is actually through that opposite sign. So through that, maybe we can learn a little bit more compassion about, you know, that polarization that we carry around so much. But this is just like a nice overview. I'm not going to really spend that much time on it because it's just a simple thing. No one needs to really be read at with it. But what I like, and this is really kind of gives the overview of what it looks like, because the idea is that the stars in the Giant Dipper or Ursa Major are the originating source of the seven rays. They are Al-Qaid, Nizar, Alioth in the Big Dipper's handle, and Megrez, Phecta, Dubhe, and Merak are the bowl. And so each of these has, as you can see, let's see if I can do this. Oh, the bear's already in there. I think I just, oh, there it goes. Okay. So you can see that each one is coming down. There's three, they each have a different color. They each go, one of them will go down to each of the three signs through the through the Big Dipper. The energy comes through the constellations to our sun, and then they are reflected back to the planets, to us here on Earth. This is an example of as above, so below. And it's very interesting. The seven stars, you know, for those of you who, you know, have done a little bit of study or have done anything in the fixed stars, you know, we're talking about the seven sisters. We're talking about this part of, oh no, sorry, the seven sisters is Andromeda. These kind of go back into an ancient time period when we were trying to understand, you know, are we seed beings from this place? You know, is this, you know, where our roots actually come from? For many of us, I know that there are talks about like that with the seven sisters, with the Andromeda in Orion's belt being, you know, the birthplace for, say, the Egyptians and for others. So it's just an interesting thing to consider. But as far as we're concerned here, these are really about the rays. These are about these energies that we feel, that we experience, that these express, and that we experience here on Earth. And this is the way in which we experience them. When I talked earlier about the seven levels, this is kind of an example of it. And if we're right down here in this very bottom circle called the physical dense body. Around that is our etheric body. Next level up is the astral or emotional body, then the lower mental body. And then there's the magical thing called the Antakarana, or the rainbow bridge. And this is that space in between where it goes from form. So you see form here in soul, spiritual triad below, personality below, spiritual triad above. This is then that connecting link then where we go into our higher selves and higher parts. The idea with esoteric astrology, with the esotericism in general, and this idea is that spirit is matter at its least dense, and matter is spirit at its most dense. So it's this idea when you consider like two triangles, like the Star of David coming in, you have a triangle coming down from above from spirit, and you have a triangle coming up from earth, and they blend over, and it actually just overlays right on our heart. Our heart is actually that central spot where they connect here on the planet for us, well, for us individually. All right, so let's see. So as far as being able to determine, let's see, we'll go back to this one. So when it comes to looking back now to the question, and this is now getting to question time, so please free to get your questions. Connection is unstable. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, you're okay. Yes.
So one thing you can do is you can lay out your birth chart. What I like to do is take a chart, and then I go through the circle. I didn't put this on for this talk, but I go through the circle, and for each one of the signs, I will go through and I will mark down what ray it is. In addition to that, I also go through, well, let's make it simple. So then by that way, you can tell right away, you know, what ray your planets are really sitting in. Then the secondary thing you're going to do is go through each of your planets. You're going to mark. Literally what I do is I sit there with a number, and I just sit there and I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, depending on where they are. And I go through the whole thing and I mark them, and I mark my whole chart. Then what I look at is how are these in relationship to one another? What relationships are what in, you know, do we have, say, Sun and Jupiter, are they in a positive relationship with one another? Are they in a challenging relationship with one another? Let's see, if I was to say, we also get into different esoteric rulers. So, which I didn't get into for this talk, but one thing I would look at is, does an esoteric ruler, what is the relationship between an esoteric ruler and a traditional ruler with one another? Say, so for Aries, the traditional ruler is Mars and the esoteric ruler is Mercury. So, and when you think about it, it's really nice. The one thing that Arians could really use is the ability to be thoughtful and to be able to communicate about what it is that their intentions are. Usually they're so headstrong in that Martian will that they just move through and they don't really care about communicating anything of it. But when they get to that higher level of being able to communicate with it, using that esoteric muscle, so to speak, you're gonna see something between Mars and Mercury in the chart. If there's a Mars Mercury square, and you then you're going to realize that Aries energy is going to be challenged on the personality level. That the will is going to be, that Mars is going to want to take over. It's going to take over more easily than the Mercury will. As far as looking at soul purpose, you basically want to look at the person's rising sign. The rising sign is going to say what that person is here to do, what the makeup is, what the overall image of the lifetime is going to be. So I don't know if that really helps in the sense, but it's kind of a sophisticated way of looking at it. And the thing is when it comes to esoteric astrology, there aren't a lot of people who typically get esoteric readings. I like to pepper my traditional readings with esoteric information. First of all, to see where the consciousness of my clients are and see whether they pick up at it. A lot of people who come to me are on a spiritual path, and so there's a resonance that happens pretty quickly. And it's almost like, you know, picking up the crumbs on a trail, and it's all of a sudden you begin to see like, oh, this isn't a small crumb, this is now a cracker, and oh, now this is bread. It's like it just gets bigger and meatier, and you can enjoy it more as you see the depth and the strength of it. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, I'm just working mine out now. What happens when you do not have one of the numbers?
Okay. Sorry?
What happens when you do not have one of the numbers?
That's a very interesting thing. You know, I mean, it's like what people talk about when you have elemental, you know, an elemental lack or something. The thought is either you have that down or you're going to attract those people to you who are going to help you learn those parts. Okay. I'd like to say probably, I mean, I, you know, want to look at the rest of your chart, but, you know, it also just might not be what your focus is for this lifetime that's coming forward.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Sure. So I'm looking at working on doing some, just some small workshops. I've taught some classes with Kepler. We just tried one to start this last week, and we didn't get that much of a sign up. So I'm trying to figure out how to make this. I mean, first of all, it's a really heady subject. So how to make this topic fun and how to make it into a little more bite-sized pieces. I'm thinking about just maybe breaking down in maybe like 4 smaller workshops and teaching them. So it'll be a little more exciting and more playful. I'd like to find a way to make it more not so intellectually stuffy, frankly. It is a very mental thing, but there's such a beautiful richness behind it all. There's I wish I could explain it in a way that would make sense. The way I guess one way I can kind of like look at it is, you know, when it'd be almost like when you're looking at a regular book and you're reading it, and the words appear in a certain way, and it would almost be like that there is another layer of words that come out of the page and come towards you. I don't really know any other way to kind of how to explain that, but there's just a way in which it adds. It's a higher level of it, but it also adds this depth and this expansiveness to it. So it kind of helps frame things in a way that, for me, makes a little bit more sense and helps to maybe not get so caught up in the personhood of life. one of the things with esoteric work is we talk about becoming personal to the impersonal and impersonal to the personal. It's this idea of becoming less attached, more neutral. We talk about the fourth ray, harmony through conflict, waiting for that conflict to wear itself out. Erin Sullivan, who's wonderful, who's on here a lot. I love her line for Scorpio. I was like, you have to just get sick and tired of yourself. You have to get to this point where you just wear yourself out and you just find it's like, you don't care as much anymore. And I think that's where, and part of it is like our age, when we get old enough, but also too, and because I believe this firmly, there are brilliant, amazing souls that are born right out of the womb with full amazing consciousness. And some of us, it takes us a lifetime to tear off all this extra stuff that we're carrying on us. But workshops and information that still continue on this type of work are, full about the rays, like we talked about, the whole esoteric meaning of the planets, the signs, the houses, and the aspects, what a soul-centered life purpose is and how to read that and determine it from the chart. And also resolving and identifying personality and soul issues, like what I talked about earlier, like if they're, a square, challenging aspects between exoteric and esoteric rulers is a prime example. If you, other ways of really learning this material, to be honest, is what I did is get on there and do searches. There are some phenomenal astrologers out there doing this work. We're few and far between, but it's really rich. And find someone who resonates with you, who the way they talk about things makes sense to you. One thing, just as a funny thing that I kind of run into a lot with it, is there are a lot of people in it that promote, say that there's a second ray individual, and they're all about love. And well, it's a love wisdom ray. And what I find is there's a lot of individuals, and even myself, I'm an Aquarian, so it kind of makes sense with the information thing, is we get very focused on the information, on the wisdom side of it, and we need to really remember about the love. We need to remember the compassion. We need to remember why we're embodied. That there's blood pumping through our body, that there's a heart pumping in our body, that we're not just this mental, intellectual construct up above. Really important. And I wrote a book called Astrological Mavericks. I've talked about it here in Ease, and which has been wonderful. Do you have what it takes to change the world? It's for people who have planets on the angles of the chart, the IC, MC, ascendant, and descendant. It's available ebook on Apple, Kindle, Amazon, and paperback through Amazon or at your local bookstore with the ISBN number. And I'm open for any other questions. It's a big group, so I don't think, well, unless anything's coming through Facebook, right?
Yeah, I have a question, Michael.
Sure.
Okay, so what about the houses? Do you go through, how do you do that? How would you work that out?
So the houses have, so just like the planets have like a slightly different meaning, the signs have a different meaning, the houses have a different meaning, they still kind of have that same sense of like the where for the houses. For me, I'm a whole sign person, so it makes it really easy because then my signs and my houses don't shift, so they really kind of keep in with one another. But they just basically show kind of like those ways in which I'm trying to think of offhand something I would use in this example. I would just say that they just, that it's not as much of a primary focus on it as the planets and the signs and the aspects are, but it's more, again, I would just say just kind of like the areas of life where it's happening. Sorry, that's not a good answer.
That's fine. Could you repeat how to work out the aspects again? Like, for example, let's just say Venus trine Mars or something.
Yeah, so when it comes to aspects in esoteric astrology, the aspects basically are going to tell you like how and the ways in which the energy is likely to manifest, like how you're going to be using it more. So if there's a trine, there's obviously an ease with it. Where the squares, it's more of this thing about, in the particular example I use, like with the Mercury and the Mars aspect, for Aries, because that would be like looking at as far as like what your Aries function is doing, that would be showing you like what kind of frustrations you're going to be having around your Aries issue. So that was more meaning what I was doing the aspects. So I would look at, as far as the aspects, what the rays are, and if they're challenging aspects, then you can kind of see that there's going to be a challenge between the way those type of rays work in your life. Whereas if they're whether they're supportive, then they're going to have more of a simple way that they're going to work with one another.
Okay, yes, that makes sense. Great. Okay, Wanda's here. Wanda, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have one. Does esoteric astrology work with the outer planets and like the main asteroids like Eris and Ceres and things like that?
They can't. The interesting thing with this is that Alice Bailey wrote these books in the 20s and the 30s. So basically none of the asteroids that come forward. I've talked to Melanie Reinhardt and Alan Oken a little bit about with the outer asteroids. And like with Chiron, it's very interesting because I think of Chiron as being this, for example, I mean, I just kind of like look through with the energy. So for Chiron, I said 2, a 4, and a 6. Kind of very similar to Sagittarius, which is also a centaur. So I would kind of like look at what the traditional understandings are for that asteroid. And I think this is where, we're all going to have to do the work as far as understanding and how to read this in. And what would be really nice in that sense is bringing in the feminine, of course. It's needed here in this esoteric realm just as desperately as it is in traditional astrology. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So if one has a repeating ray quite a few times, then that would be like a main focus for the soul.
What's a little bit frustrating about this work is that there is this aspect of it which is very set and defined because of the astrological chart. But there's another aspect to it. Have either of you heard of the Michael teaching?
Yes, they do.
Messages from Michael.
Yes.
It's very interesting because I learned that back in the 80s. And so when I learned this, I see the esoteric work, at least the Alice Bailey's work, to be very much a higher octave of the Michael teachings. And in that sense, God, where was I going with that train of thought? I'm so sorry. What was the question you asked me for that, Linda?
Good question.
There's the Mercury in Pisces. I have to do with the writings when it was written.
Oh yeah, main focus with one ray overly emphasized.
Oh yeah. So there's a place called the Seven Rays Institute. Michael, I forget what his last name is, who works with that group, and they've created a personality test you can take, kind of like the Enneagram, and where you can go in and you answer these long series of questions. They've been working on it for several years, many iterations. I don't know if it's working yet or if they've gotten it, but there's this other sort of an aspect to this, just like with the Michael teaching, that isn't so concrete. And that aspect of it, I think, is one of the parts that is a little bit challenging. So you could actually look at your astrology, but based on what I've understood about this, is you can look at your astrological chart, look and perceive it as we need to, as far as the rays, get a really good delineation and understanding about it. But you can also be and have different parts of those rays also operating in a way that isn't about these aspects. And that, to me, can be problematic, because it allows for a subjectiveness, someone else's subjective quality telling you what the truth is. But the important part here is that, and as what it says overall is, and the same thing with the Michael teaching, that was the resonance I saw too, is that, see what it is that works for you. and go from there. And that's basically how I've gone about it. And so in that sense, it does work for me. I just don't try to be too persnickety about it, I guess is the right way to say. I don't want to talk about anything in absolutes, because it's spirit and there's an amorphous quality about it. Does that make sense to you guys? I'm
Yes.
sure you know.
Yes, definitely. Yes, I would use the houses myself.
Mm-hmm.
I would use, Mars, Venus, Mercury, etc. Go around and add them as well, because I just think the more numbers, the better, and then you could do kind of a tally or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've made up little worksheets where I've done that, where it's kind of like, the strength of preponderances in a way, kind of a thing of showing that. And I mean, I think that's true. The ascendant's going to be something that's going to really just going to be such a strong play in it. The moon in esoteric astrology is considered a dead planet, which is very interesting, because the idea is that the emotional baggage of your past and your family lineage and your biology are likely what's going to hold you back on your spiritual path, as most of us have encountered. So, a lot of really interesting nuances. This is, it's a very inner and outer exploration at the same time, in a way that I haven't really experienced in any other way.
Okay, Michael. Well, it certainly has been fascinating. Oh, Wanda, yes, go ahead.
Just listening to what you were saying there, it almost kind of sounds like, and from what you were saying throughout the presentation, I don't know, it almost kind of seems like esoteric astrology is more of an objective and detached, kind of like a Uranus Uranian.
Beautiful. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Very good way to put it. Very good way to put it. Because the idea is, I mean, again, like, I was just talking about with, the harmony through conflict and, Taurus and Scorpio. I mean, it's Taurus and Scorpio, the two signs that have the hardest time being neutral. So that's going to be a real challenge. And, if you're not being neutral to things, you're being upset by everything, it's hard to get to that place of neutrality, that sense of having an inner sense, a sense of being an observation, the idea that we rest on the shore of our emotions as opposed to being in the middle of the sea of them.
Oh, that's funny, because both Wanda and I have our nodes in Taurus, Scorpio. And so would you use the nodes as well?
What's interesting is they don't really talk about the nodes. And that's one of the things that, I think where EA is, evolutionary astrology, is such a great gift, because Jeff just brilliantly has delineated all that in such a way. But I think, that's a whole, again, another realm of work that can be done. I mean, I think, it's one of this is a body of knowledge that is basically, it's kind of like how astrology got in the 19th century, where there are only a few people studying it. I mean, this is one of those areas where this could really use a lot more people of interest and love to bring some life back into it again, for all the reasons you guys have discussed.
Yes, I'm looking at all the signs and the three each, etc. And some of them make sense and some of them don't, but it's certainly very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's kind of neat about it. I mean, so like what I think about, like with Capricorn, essentially, and Capricorn has three rays. I mean, some of the signs actually have three rays. Capricorn is one of them, and has ray 1, ray 3, and ray 7. And it's interesting when you think of Capricorn, because the ancient way of looking at Capricorn is the sea goat. So to me, in a way, that's like, not that it's about will, but it's like that underwater, it's that very first level. And then it steps out on the water, it steps out on the ground, it's walking around the ground. And then it finally gets up to the top of the mountain. It's like this three pinnacle aspect of Capricorn. And, we've met those different types of Capricorns in our lives as well. So it's these nuances that when you kind of perceive into it and kind of see, or, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the one that stands out for me is number 7, Aries, Cancer, Capricorn. So why would Aries be there?
Exactly, and that's fun. I love, these are really great questions. What I love about Aries, you know, in a way, what I think about with Aries in this, and when you look at it, Aries is first ray and seventh ray. It's alpha and omega,
Oh, I love that. That's terrific.
right?
Yeah.
So it's this understanding. It's like, you know, and it's almost in that sense of this, you know, Aries to Scorpio in a sense of this strength. And then there's the other way, you know, they get into the triangles as well. This is and that's something I've been wanting, you know, I still really need to learn about. And Alan Leo does a lot about how the triangles of signs together work towards lifting us up through these understandings. It's you know, another one of those amazing wormholes of astrology.
Well, yes. Well, Mars is super important in evolutionary astrology, so I'm glad to see it as a seventh ray. Excellent.
For
Okay,
Uranus, yeah, exactly, and the only one who carries it.
right. So,
Yeah.
any further questions, Wanda, or shall we wind down?
No, I was just going to make a comment, kind of a follow-up comment on what you had mentioned about maybe the Aries being in number 7 organization. You know, Aries types are usually, you know, organization is usually kind of thought of as, say, government and even, you know, military. And you definitely find, you know, that Aries energy that's needed along with the Capricorn to get the organization, you know, moving and you know, proceeding on. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
And when you think about Cancer, you know, you need a hub.
Yeah.
You need a home for the organization. So yeah, I mean, it's really it's I get a little goosebumps as I think of it, because it's like it's one of those things where you kind of look at like, oh yeah, there is another, you know, it's another beautiful lens through which to look at astrology again. And I find it to be really kind of tickling in a way how it works.
Yeah, I really like it, and it's got the esoteric rulerships in rays that make sense to me. For example, Gemini, love, wisdom, ray 2, that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. I love it. It's
It's really
great.
fun. So yeah, if we want to do another talk on parts of it, I'm happy to maybe do something that's a little more in line with maybe doing someone's chart or something, or doing something a little more fun or expressive. But you guys see what it'd be neat to actually have someone, because I would love to learn a little bit more with the EA too, and see like how these kind of two if they dovetail at all.
Yeah, that would make a really very interesting meeting. Yes, so let's think about that for the future. But anyway, Michael, so any final thoughts before we wind down?
Nope. Let's see. I'm just and then here in the Mexico. And everyone a wonderful day. Thanks so much, Linda and Wanda and Olive, for the wonderful work you do, this wonderful capacity, this great gift you're giving the community. Thank you for supporting us.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael Bartlett, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.